Here we see the ecosystem of the Sleeping Bear National Park. In an ecosystem, there are different niches or different uses of the environment's resources. Every ecosystem has a carrying capacity or limit to a population it can sustain. Animal behavior is most commonly studied in an ecosystem. Ethology is the study of animal behavior in its natural environment, and behavioral ecology is the scientific study of animal behavior.
A community is inclusive to all organisms that inhabit a particular area. Each community has a trophic structure, feeding relationships that control the energy flow of the ecosystem. In this woodland community, we have a primary producer, the mossy grass, a primary consumer, the deer, and a secondary consumer, the mountain lion. The deer displays herbivory in its consumption of the plants, and the mountain lion shows predation in its consumption of other animals like the deer.
The immigration of zebra mussels into the Great Lakes has caused such exponential growth in their population that they have become an invasive species. Not a natural part of their ecosystem, zebra mussels have no natural predators and little competition to affect their population levels. Because of their virtually unlimited resources, zebra mussels have exhibited exponential growth. Most animal populations exhibit logistic growth, a period of speedy exponential growth that levels out as the population reaches carrying capacity.
Decomposers or detrivores play a key role in the ecosystem. They break down dead organic matter, or detritus. In this form of an interspecific interaction, decomposers demonstrate commensalism, where they benefit from the dead organic matter as a food source and the dead organism is unaffected. This is an example of the carbon cycle. The carbon in the dead organism is transferred to the decomposer when it is eaten, and the carbon in the decomposer is transferred when it in turn is eaten. In the aquatic biome of Lake Michigan, there are three different zones: the benthic zone, or the bottom surface of an aquatic environment, the aphotic zone, where the light penetration is limited and insufficient for photosynthesis, and the photic zone, the narrow top slice of the lake, where light penetration is sufficient for photosynthesis. There is also a thermocline, a narrow stratum of rapid temperature change. Eutrophication is the process by which nutrients become highly concentrated in the lake. This can lead to increased growth in organisms like algae.
A pyramid of biomass is a representation showing the physical biomass of each trophic level. At the bottom, you have your foundation species, which has the most biomass. This is often plant life. From your plant life, you have gross primary production, which is the total energy as biomass produced by the plants. Also, in a trophic structure, you have a keystone species that has a disproportionate effect on the community to its population size. For example, keystone species are often primary consumers as they eat the primary producers and provide energy to the tertiary consumers. These pyramids of biomass are often density dependent as they are regulated by population size.
Different organisms have different trends of reproduction, as in the difference between K selection and R selection. R selection is the concept that in certain populations, high productive rate and low survival rate is the best method of species survival. For example, a fly produces hundreds of offspring, few of which survive. K selection is the concept that fewer, more complex offspring and a higher survival rate is the best survival option. A deer is an example of this method of selection in that they usually produce one fawn to one doe at a single time. When it comes to the abundance of a species, there are more organisms that use R selection in comparison to K selection. This is known as relative abundance in that it refers to how common or rare a species is relative to other species in a defined location or community. Species richness is a part of species diversity in that species richness breaks down to how many organisms are in a community based on numbers. Species diversity, however, is based on how many high-sustaining and developing species there are. K selection directly relates to species diversity in that it produces complex animals, and R selection is most involved in richness as its high reproductive rate boosts the richness count.
Sexual selection in birds is very particular. Competition between males is very common, where the males have very specific mating rituals, generally including some sort of song and dance that the female then chooses which male she finds to be most impressive. This is called female mate choice. This type of selection keeps species from intermixing and maintains a group of species status as a population. A population is defined as a localized group of individuals that are capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. Avian offspring have a unique form of associating parent figures to their young. This is called imprinting, where the first object the baby bird sees it will associate as its parent.
Learning or experience-based behavioral changes is a main study of animal behavior in ethology. The sensitive period is a limited phase in an animal's development when learning particular behaviors takes place. Certain animal behaviors develop a cognitive map, which is a mental representation in the nervous system of the spatial relationships in the environment around it. Landmarks often represent a cognitive map, like if an otter recognizes a specific rock as the right location near its den. There are two main types of learning in animal development. There's classical conditioning, which is a type of associative learning that associates a normally irrelevant stimulus with a fixed behavior. Another type of learning is operant conditioning, also an associative learning in which an animal learns to associate one of its own behaviors with a reward or punishment and whether to repeat or avoid that behavior.
Among all of the present-day animals, humans are by far the most complex species. The human population growth has been exponentially rising to our present-day 7.2 billion. The human population has had a major influence on greenhouse gas emissions because of the industrialization that has occurred. As the greenhouse gas emissions rise, there is a rise in global temperatures, also known as global warming. This warming leads to the melting of ice caps, which is detrimental to worldwide ecosystems as the climate changes. Not only are humans leading factors of global warming, but also mankind is a component to the increase of acid rain, which toxifies the environment, harming the organisms that live in it. The toxic rain is introduced into the ecosystem and travels through the food chain as each successive animal preys on another. For example, a fish that is carrying toxins from the pesticide runoff is caught by a local fisherman, and both the fish and the toxins are ingested by the man. This is an example of biological magnification. In the end, the way we as humans interact with and treat our Earth comes back to us. For this reason, and for many more, we should try much harder to preserve our wildlife and keep things as pure as they started.